Ever since Triple H took over as head of creative in WWE, it's given a lot of people an opportunity to rise up the card who wouldn't have been given that opportunity otherwise. And this has meant a lot more new stars being created. Obviously then, it's only going to be a matter of time before some of these new stars reach the level of world champion. But who are the most noteworthy among these? Well, that's exactly what we're going to be looking at right now, starting with Jacob Fatu. Yes, when you look at the Bloodline 2.0, there's one person who stands out above everyone else as an absolute superstar in waiting, with that being the most unpredictable member of the group, the Samoan Werewolf, Jacob Fatu. What makes Jacob Fatu a shoo-in to be a future world champion? Well, he has it all: the look, the presence, and an incredible level of athletic in-ring skill for a man his size. But then the greatness of this San Francisco native has always been evident as far back as his days in Major League Wrestling, the very place he became a one-time World Heavyweight Champion and a one-time National Openweight Champion. So those who were watching him in that promotion have been long aware of what he could do. And with him now being a part of the WWE roster, it means this audience has finally been introduced to the phenomenon that is the son of the Tonga Kid. How long will it be before he inevitably has big-time gold around his waist? Not long, we hope. We could even see WWE going all in on Jacob while the iron is hot and have him usurp Solo Sikoa as the new tribal chief. Maybe he'll even go on to have a one-on-one match with Roman Reigns or be the eventual one to dethrone Cody Rhodes as WWE champion. And while this may be unlikely at this early stage in his run, it would certainly be an impactful way to make a new star. And we've no doubt that, if put in this position, the Samoan Werewolf would thrive. But he's not the only young star on the WWE roster right now who'd be destined for title greatness before long, as the exact same thing could be said about our next subject, Bron Breakker. That's right, if Jacob Fatu is the blue chipper of SmackDown, then over on Raw, that title could very easily be given to the son of Rick Steiner, as in just a few short months, he's made an absolutely explosive impact on the main roster. And the way he's done this is by showing off his freakish athletic ability at every turn, with him using it to completely wipe out any opponent who's been standing in his way, whether that be Ricochet, Sami Zayn, or anyone else. Of course, even prior to showing up on Monday nights though, Bron was already making his presence felt on NXT, as during the early days of that brand's 2.0 incarnation, he'd become a two-time world champion. So it's not like he's any stranger to having gold around his waist. As far as main roster accolades go, however, he's still working his way up to that point, with him continuing to progress a little bit each and every week. In fact, as it stands right now, he's currently the Intercontinental Champion, a belt which has felt far more important to have around your waist again ever since the reign of the mighty Gunther. So the Georgia native clearly isn't wasting any time making sure people know exactly who he is and exactly what he's about. And we expect that for this reason, it won't be long before he goes all the way to the top, with him possibly even being the man to defeat the Ring General to become the World Heavyweight Champion at some point next year. But even if he doesn't win the big one as soon as this, Bron Breakker is destined to have his moment in the sun eventually anyway, as he's simply too good to be denied at this point. Anyone who's seen any of his matches will be able to tell you that. Seriously, we're not just talking about a future world champion here. No, we're talking about a potential future face of the company altogether. That said, if Bron wants this spot, then he's going to have to fight hard for it, as there are other people looking to pick up the same moniker themselves, one of which is our next subject, another future world champion in waiting, Trick Williams. That's right, it's scary to think that at this point, only 3 years into his in-ring career, Trick Williams is already at the level he's at, as down on NXT he's become one of the biggest babyface stars they have there in short order. Probably the biggest babyface since the days of Johnny Gargano, in fact. And the way the South Carolinian has reached this level has been to do just what he does best, show off his incredible charisma at every turn. Sure, he might still be somewhat green in the ring, but give him time, and we've no doubt he'll level up in this respect too. And when he finally does that, it'll be time for Trick to graduate all the way to the main roster, and from there, show either a SmackDown or Raw audience what he's capable of. What will happen after that? The sky's the limit for him as far as we're concerned. There's every chance we could be looking at WWE's next big breakout star if the stars align properly for him. Needless to say then, that success will undoubtedly include world title gold, probably multiple times over. No, it might not happen right away, but give it a few years, and we fully expect Williams to be headlining PLEs against the likes of Cody Rhodes and Roman Reigns, either defending his world title against them or winning it from them. And at that point, there will be no more denying we're fully in his era, as we'll all be chanting "whoop that trick" with glee as he lays the smackdown on his given opponent of the night. Who knows, he may even get to have a main event PLE match against an old friend and rival of his during this period, someone who's already had quite a history with him down in NXT. Someone who's our next subject as it happens, none other than Carmelo Hayes. Yes, this is a guy who has it. That indefinable quality which makes someone a star, and in the words of Enzo Amore, you can't teach that. Sure, there's a lot of guys out there who are great wrestlers, and there are a lot of guys out there who are great promos, but to really break out in a major way, you need to have an it factor on top of this. Obviously then, Hayes has no issues in that regard. Shawn Michaels clearly knows it, and this is why he pushed him all the way to the top of NXT while he was in charge of booking him there, so much so that he had him become a one-time NXT World Champion and two-time NXT North American Champion. Hell, more so than even that, the Heartbreak Kid had him be the centerpiece of his promotion in many ways, while he was programmed with Trick Williams in the best feud NXT has seen since the days of Johnny Gargano and Tommaso Ciampa. And with Hayes completely killing it in this feud, it only made sense it would be a matter of time before he was called up to the main roster, with this eventually happening in April of 2024. Sure, he's had to work his way back up from the bottom in some respects here, as he's been in more of a mid-card position since debuting on SmackDown, but that doesn't mean he hasn't shown during the times he's been given some focus, such as when he had a great match against Cody Rhodes on his first official night there. So, give it a couple of more years and we expect Carmelo to be a major player on whatever brand he's on at that time, whether that be as a heel or as a babyface, and with this status, we expect titles to follow, namely either the World Heavyweight title or the WWE title. In fact, we wouldn't be surprised to see him hold both of these at different points, fully solidifying himself as one of the top acts of the company's next era. Yes, by time all is said and done, we could be talking about Carmelo Hayes as one of the greatest champions of all time in the WWE system, right up there alongside his mentor Shawn Michaels. But then what else would you expect from someone with as much talent as he has? That said, he's not the only person who's come out of NXT in recent years that's got a future filled with world titles ahead of him, as the same thing applies to our next subject, Bronson Reed. Sure, he might not seem as obvious a choice for a future champ as Carmelo Hayes or Trick Williams are on the face of things, given the relatively mid-card spot he's occupied throughout his time in WWE, but don't let that fool you into thinking Bronson Reed doesn't have a major upside to it. After all, this is a man who, need we remind you, pinned Kazuchika Okada clean during the 2022 G1 Climax. And it's not just his success during his Japan run which makes us think there are big things in the Australian's future. No, there's also the fact that prior to this, between 2019 and 2021, he had a pretty good initial run in WWE down on the NXT brand, with him there becoming a one-time North American champion. So when he returned to Raw in 2022 then, it seemed like a given he'd be getting a major push, especially as by that point, Triple H had taken over control of the booking. Yes, it's true, it's taken him a while to reach his full potential under this new regime, as for large parts of the last 2 years, creative have seemingly had nothing for him. That said, in recent weeks this looks to have changed, as following a total destruction of Seth Rollins on an episode of Raw, the man formerly known as Jonah has started to build up a lot of momentum, enough to where it's now easy to imagine him holding a world title before long. The only question left then is, will this happen on his current home of Raw, or will it happen when he inevitably gets sent over to SmackDown for a spell? It's hard to say, but wherever and whenever the opportunity presents itself for Reed, we know he's ready to strike now. And we know just how quickly he could put either of the current champs down with one of his trademark big splashes off the top rope. Hell, given his Samoan heritage, it's entirely possible he gets tied into the whole bloodline story at some point, and there gets fast-tracked up the pecking order even more quickly. But it's not all wrestlers of Samoan heritage who have been in the bloodline. No, on occasion, there's been an honorary Uso, such as the time our next subject memorably joined the group in 2021, Sami Zayn. Now, it might seem like a strange thing to consider Sami Zayn as a future world champion, because at 40 years old, he's already a well-established ring general, someone who's a lot closer to the end of his career than the beginning at this point. Still though, for all the success he's had in places like Ring of Honor, Pro Wrestling Guerrilla, and WWE, one thing he's never done is win a main roster world title in the latter. Sure, he did win the big one down in NXT, and after getting massively over in late 2021, he became painfully close to dethroning Roman Reigns at February 18th, 2023's Elimination Chamber in front of his hometown of Montreal. But even if he was the sentimental favorite heading into that one, Sami just wasn't able to get the job done, and so for that reason, he remains without his elusive world title run. It's just as well he remains hugely popular with fans then, enough to where even now, 2 years after the peak of his involvement in the Bloodline saga, the man famously trained by El Generico remains one of Raw's most beloved babyfaces. But then, how could you not love him, as he always comes across as one of the most genuinely likable wrestlers out there? And with his recent Intercontinental title reign reminding everyone that he's more than capable of carrying a division with a top prize around his waist, it's only further fueled fans' desire to see him win the big one eventually, whether this be the World Heavyweight title on Raw or the WWE title over on SmackDown. Will he get this run before his time is up? We certainly hope so, as we struggle to think of anyone who's yet to win the gold who deserves it more. So for him not to reach the mountaintop would be a true crime. Of course, if we were placing bets, we'd say it'll happen eventually. Whether it happens before or after our next subject, though, is another question, as he is a close on-screen friend and ally of his, another person who's gotten hugely over in recent years, Jey Uso. Yes, who could have seen this one coming back in 2019? After all, while Jey Uso was a well-established tag team wrestler alongside his brother Jimmy back then, so much so that the pair had become multiple-time tag team champions and one of the few beacons of light inside an otherwise dull division, no one had him pegged for being a breakout singles star. But here we are in 2024, and main event Jey Uso is one of the most over people on the entire Raw roster, someone so popular with fans that it really does feel like there's a good chance he'll be a singles world champion before all is said and done. Hell, it's not like he hasn't had opportunities to win the WWE title already. In fact, he's had multiple chances during his various bouts with his cousin Roman Reigns while he was in the midst of his 1,316-day run as top dog in the company. As of yet, though, no matter how close he's come, Jey is yet to win the big one in a singles capacity. But with him still only being 39, a relatively young age by modern day standards, there's every possibility his time will come eventually, more than likely on Monday nights where he currently resides. Just imagine the pop which would happen if somewhere down the line the son of Rikishi finally gets another shot at the gold and after a hard-fought battle is able to at last get the 1-2-3 to stand victorious. The arena on that night would likely erupt, and this would fully solidify Jey Uso as a true main eventer and someone who could no longer be defined by his run as part of arguably the greatest tag team in modern-day WWE history. We guess we'll just have to wait with bated breath and see if it happens and cheer wildly if it does. But what of the other great breakout star of 2020's WWE? Surely he deserves a spot in today's video too, right? Well, when you're talking about L.A. Knight, the only reasonable answer to that question is, yeah. Yes, it's been quite a rise for Shawn Ricker over the past few years, as after spending a long time being generally underappreciated in places like TNA and the NWA, he finally got his shot at the big time when he signed with WWE in 2021. Even then, though, it was expected that there was going to be a very definitive ceiling on what he could achieve within WWE, something which felt especially true once he was called up to the main roster and given the gimmick of Max Dupree. Thankfully, though, things began to turn around for the Maryland native as he would eventually revert back to being LA Knight. And with a whole new main roster audience getting exposed to him then, it wasn't long before he took off in popularity, largely on account of his promo style, which heavily cribbed from the likes of Steve Austin and The Rock. That's right, for a period there back in mid-2023, it felt like Knight was, at times, the most over person on the entire roster. One thing this hasn't led to for him yet, however, is world title success. Now, while he has recently won the United States title from Logan Paul, the real top gold still evades him, something we know must be an issue he plans to rectify before all is said and done. Now, we're not expecting him to be the one to beat Cody Rhodes or anything, but if LA Knight was drafted to Raw, we could absolutely see him with his cult status getting a run with the World Heavyweight title. In fact, we could absolutely see him being the one to beat Gunther. He's certainly over enough, and giving him that run with the top Raw belt would be a nice capper on what's been a lengthy career. But what about the opposite side of the spectrum? What about those future world champions who are just starting out their careers? Well, that's where our next subject enters the conversation, none other than Obafemi. Yes, on the face of things, Obafemi might feel like many other big men we've seen in the past, exactly the kind of person Vince McMahon used to push to the moon. But what separates him from others like the Great Khali or Giant Gonzalez is that he's proven himself to be very good in the ring. That's right, we're talking about a man who was a track and field star during his time at both Middle Tennessee State University and the University of Alabama. And while this doesn't necessarily mean someone will be a good wrestler, Femi has continued to impress throughout his time in NXT thus far, so much so that as things stand right now, he's the current NXT North American Champion. Really, at the rate he's going, there's every possibility that he'll be NXT World Champion by this time next year. And a year after that, we can easily see him being called up to the main roster. Who will be WWE Champion and World Heavyweight Champion at that point, we don't know. But whoever they are, they're going to have to watch their backs as the big man is going to be coming for not only them, but also for their gold. Maybe this will be the point Obafemi reaches his true potential then by standing tall at the top of the division. But even if it takes a little while longer for him to reach the mountaintop, we can see a situation where it happens for him eventually, because even in this new Triple H-led regime, big men are always going to get more opportunity than smaller ones. Honestly, he could be a multiple-time world champion before the decade is out across both Raw and SmackDown. But Obafemi isn't the only current member of the NXT roster we could see being a world champion in the future, as we could see the exact same happening for our next subject, Javon Evans. Yes, if you haven't been keeping up with NXT recently, then you might not be familiar with Javon Evans. However, we're sure everyone will know his name soon, because at just 20 years old, he's already one of the brightest prospects WWE has on its developmental roster. Yes, only a year into his WWE career, and only 6 years into his career overall, the Greensboro native already looked primed to break out in a big way. Yes, while he narrowly missed out on winning the NXT World title from Ethan Page, give Evans enough time, and we're sure he'll not only eventually win the developmental title, but also do the same thing on the main roster too. That's right, before the decade is out, it seems highly likely that he'll either be Raw or SmackDown bound, and once he gets there, it'll just be a matter of time before he gets some additional gold around his waist. Will it be the WWE title or the World Heavyweight title? We don't know, but whichever it is, Javon Evans seems like a surefire can't miss for the company going forward. All they have to do is keep letting him do what he does best, and eventually his time in the spotlight will arrive, and within that spotlight will be world title gold. Hell, like with some of the other people we've discussed today, it's entirely possible that he'll be a multiple-time world champion in WWE when his career ends. He's certainly got time on his side, as, need we remind you, he's still only 20 years old. And that means we could yet have decades of his work to look forward to, work which will almost certainly include title matches and title defenses as the years go on. But it's not like Javon Evans is alone in his desire to become a future world champion. No, as we've seen today, there are plenty of people waiting for that opportunity who haven't received it yet. And given how much talent they collectively have between them, the reality is they simply can't be denied forever, and that they'll have to get their runs with the top prize eventually.